Do you remember what the average 30-year mortgage rate was 2 years ago this month? Was it 5.1%? Was it 6.3%? Was it 7.2% or 8.1%? Congratulations to all of you that got that right, which was at least 28%. One
Woo!
thing to note for where we are today and why we bring it up, we had the largest mortgage rate drop in over a year. It's at 6.3% today. And also, what that meant is that mortgage applications spiked. They are up 23% over last year. So that is a sign of good news this week. Feeds into some of the data that we have coming on the federal policies. A few things to know from the last month to put some perspective on what is going on in your world. Again, 30-year fixed rates are averaging about 6.3%, the lowest this year. Part of the reason for that is that the jobs report just came out. What it showed is that August job numbers were not very good. Unemployment is at a 4-year high. That again makes it a little bit more likely that the Fed is going to cut interest rates next week, despite the fact that inflation data that came out yesterday is up. That's at least what the market is predicting.
Now, just FYI, guys, assuming that the Fed does cut rates, that doesn't mean that interest rates are going to drop. The interest rate drop that we just saw here, that 6.3, has already factored in the concept that the Fed will drop the rate. What the rates will be looking like moving forward for us is what the Fed actually says about what they are planning to do in the future.
It's exactly right, because
So
a
the
lot of that stuff is
6.3,
priced in this week.
that's right. So the 6.3 is reflective of the concept that the Fed is going to drop rates.
Also, interesting data, national existing home sales. They are slightly up over last year, but inventory is up 16%. That is the most amount of homes that are available on the market at any point since 2020. Again, national data. And in addition, new home sales, interestingly enough, are down 8% over a year ago. But what is very interesting is 37% of builders cut prices. The average, again, where it's been running for the last few years, is about 5%. So the fact that over 1 in 3 new homes have a reduced price sign is a big deal. Now, one of the things that we've been asked for and we're trying out today is, hey, but this is a lot of data. How do I actually use this data to have a conversation with my clients and my prospect to get them to open up? And so that's what we wanted to highlight. The one other data point, and again, that goes right into what we're going to talk about, is it is the slowest summer pace in a decade. So if you're feeling things have been a little slow, right, there is a reason for that. If you are new to real estate in the last decade, this is your slowest summer pace on average. Okay, so what does this mean, right? What are some good questions to ask Paige based upon this data to get some people to open up?
So the goal of this kind of questions that we want to go through now that we've kind of explained where the national market is looking, that the overall perspective here, is simply that you want to ask the question to let your buyers and sellers have the space to make decisions that make sense for them, right? Some people will really appreciate and want to know that it's a buyer's market, and it may spur them to act. Some people, time wise, it just doesn't make sense for them to pull the trigger in this market because of other things that they have going on in their life. So our job is not to push them to make the wrong decision or push them to make a decision that may be good for our pocketbooks. Our goal is to help them make the choice and ask the questions. So the question here of how open-minded would you be to locking in current rates, knowing that if rates go down, as we kind of think that they will, and you could refinance then. Um, Here's the goal of this question of what you're trying to uncover is you're really trying to understand and help them understand. And I truly believe this. If you ever wanted somebody to time the market as a buyer, this is the time. right? Inventory is high. My goodness, how many on this call would love to have this kind of inventory in COVID? Yes, please. Inventory, the buyers have choices, right? We're no longer like, well, I hope you like the treehouse next to White Oak where it flooded 17 times because that's your only option, right? We have choices. We have price reductions. So prices are coming down and days on market are going up, which means sellers are going to be feeling this and be a little more anxious and apt to negotiate with your buyer. So when you ask this question, I would probably follow it up with the reasoning, right? The reason I ask this question, Mr. Buyer, is that, the overall environment for buying right now is pretty favorable to you. Inventory is in some cases at an all-time high. Price reductions are up across the board, and days on market are numbers we have not seen in years.
Paige,
Um,
what's another good question to ask buyers?
I think this question here, if you've considered comparing resales to new construction, right? What's the difference between the two? Are you going to get a better deal on resales versus new construction?
Now, Paige, when you think about that, again, these are buyer focused questions. I know you mentioned that again, it's a great market to be a buyer. What are some good questions to ask sellers?
This one's a prime one, right? You still want to be dating me 3 months from now, right? You want to be having this same conversation 3 months from now. When we first met, Mr. Seller, you said it was really important that you had your home sold by the beginning of October. We're here in September. It looks like that's going to be hard. What if we're still on the market 3 months from now? How would
And
that
again, reasons
feel?
for that is inventory is the highest since 2020, and the homes are selling at the slowest pace in a decade. Paige, what's another good seller question?
A version of this is, today's price cuts are going to be tomorrow's prices. And so, Jane, you saw that your neighbor just cut their price by 5% or whatever they did. When that sells, that will become a comp. How do you feel about that? Well, I don't feel
Again, it's a
very good. Well, that becomes the data point because what you're trying to get your sellers to understand is that it is the hardest market they have had to sell in since probably the Great Recession. It's not their fault that they are in this market. The only thing they can do is choose how they respond in this market. And your goal is to give them tools and ask questions along the way so they can come to the conclusion that's right for them and their household.
That's exactly right. Now, what does that look like then for Houston data, right? That's national average. You get a couple hooks to be able to have conversations on what they're hearing on the news. In Houston, the data that was just released from HAR 2 days ago for last month is that total sales volume for last month was up 9.2%. And again, when you look at almost 10,000 transactions in Houston last month, remember, there is enough volume for anyone, not for everyone,
I
right?
also want to make a comment here on this slide specifically. While sales are up compared to August of last year, right? This is August to August. Remember, we had the hurricane in July, and typically 2 months, the July and August data, you will have had lower sales because of that incident. So the fact that sales are up may not necessarily be a reflection that things are on the up.
Yes. Active listings up 26%. There are over 60,000 homes on HAR right now. That is an enormous number compared
Great
to any
selections
time in the
for
past.
buyers. Great
Great for
selections.
buyers. Days on market increased from 47 to 52 over the last year. Also, the supply of single family homes increased to over 5 months, up from about 4 months last year. One of the things that is very interesting, again, when you look through what happens typically in a declining market, right? Inventory goes up, days on market goes up, supply goes up, price reductions go up, and then prices start to fall. Where we are right now is that prices are flat on a year over year basis. That's a big data point in terms of predicting what's coming. Specifically in the townhome and condo market, the number of sales declined by 14%, But even more interesting is that townhome and condo prices declined by 7%. So it was a better time to sell your condo last year than now by a wide margin.
Mhm.
Paige, as you look through that again, inventory, balanced market, right? What a lot of people are used to in the history of Houston, but just not at any point in time since COVID.
Mhm.
Pending sales, again, about where we were this time last year. Remember, the yellow line last year had a lot of impact from the derecho and the hurricane. When you look on days on market, again, we've been consistently higher than
Yeah.
where we have been at any point for the last 2 years.
Yeah, across the board. That's a big factor.
Big factor. And again, your number of price reductions has been higher than any point in the last 2 years. And again, notice that it has increased quite a bit over the last week. That has helped to drive some of the volume in pendings.
Yeah.
And so again, you've got about 1 in 5, 1 in 4 homes with a price reduction. That is very different than how many agents lived about 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Well, and don't forget, y'all, we still have seasonality here. And so it is seasonally typical for August and September to be slower. And it is typical that prices become reduced this time as buyers start to come back into the market for the fall buying season.
Now, here's what I think is one of the most interesting slides that you have, and this is one of the most powerful slides you have right now for sellers. What this shows you is the average monthly home prices in Houston going back for 5 years. The part on this that is so interesting, and again, part of the reason that it feels so difficult to be a seller right now, is that there have been 20 months in the past 4 years where prices were higher than they are right now. And again, here's what that means. You look at the stock market and you're like, the S&P 500 just closed at another all-time high record yesterday, right? So if you're in the stock market, everything is up, right, on a broad basis. If you're looking at Houston home prices, especially if you're a seller, that's not true, right? There were times in 2022, 23, 24, and earlier this year where it was a better time to be a seller. That is a very, very, very different market than what we've seen in anything in the COVID years.
And especially if you've got folks that bought in the COVID years and need to sell, and they bought high because that's what you had to do. That was the market of the moment. And they have to sell now, and they're not selling at the price where they purchased. There's going to be some angst there because emotionally, and we have to really understand the emotional turmoil that this causes is for whatever reason, and somebody said this to me the other night, and I thought it was brilliant. We are programmed to believe that in real estate, you always buy low and get to sell high. Nowhere else in your life does that exist. Do you buy a brand new car, drive it off the lot, and then expect to be able to resell it to the dealership for more than what you paid for it? Absolutely not. The hope is that in real estate, you're able to do that, to buy low, sell high. If you hold on to real estate for a long period of time, yes, that trend is true. But if you have to transact in the shorter term, especially in Houston, where historically our appreciation rates are between 2 to 3% a year, that is not always true. And there will be some angst amongst your sellers around that situation.
And again, that's feeling based, not data based. But know that most people are having emotional based conversations when they don't feel they're getting what they want. And that's why there's a lot of tension and a lot of angst in the market.
That's right. And especially when you're talking about somebody's perceived value of money, right? I thought I had this much money, and now you're telling me that I don't. I am now taking an emotional loss on money that I actually never really had.
The other reason that this slide is so powerful, and again, this is on our trends page with live data updated every month, is because when you have people that tell you, oh, I'm just going to rent, I think I'm just going to wait it out for another year, right? The data on this shows them specifically how there were 20 past months that were better than where they are now. And again, in Houston, typically this is about a 5 year cycle on down. We're about 2.5 years in on a down cycle. And so your question again is not, hey, what happens if you rent for a year, but what happens if I need to rent for 3 or 4 years for the home to get back to the prices that I would have had last year?
Mhm.
Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable managing tenants for that long?
Yeah.
That's why, again, this data is new to many, many people.
Yeah, sort of as a worst case scenario. And some will say yes, and some will say no.
So the question again that we get asked and that we wanted to bring into this is how do I use that data to be able to have better conversations with my clients and prospects, right? How do I use this data to help them have wise decisions? One of the things that we wanted to go back to start this as a framework is what we said last month. Very interesting data from KW that came out that said what clients are looking for now in this crazy world with so much stuff coming out of Washington, D.C., is they want comfort at a higher level than ever before. And so over the last month, we used that lens to look at the data that we're seeing across our team, right? What are people doing well? What are people not doing well? And typically, where things have been breaking is when we have not been providing that comfort, that emotional feel, that warm, snuggly blanket. And the violation of that, again, leads to hurt feelings, emotion, lack of price reductions, lack of people making wise decisions because their emotional angst, that inner 2-year-old child is taking over.
That's right. And like they want a Snuggie, but we didn't give them a Snuggie. Instead, we came in and told them that their baby was ugly. And because that was a practical conversation, right? Your baby is ugly. Nobody really wants to hear that, especially with all the other noise in the world. So the level of comfort that you need to, that is required from us to be counselors first and advisor second is now more important than ever before. And what you have is that sellers in particular, they're going to feel hurt when you told them something and they chose not to do it, and then they finally do it and now they have to do it again and again. And it's the I told you so. You didn't say I told you so, but they hear I told you so because whatever we're saying to them makes them feel that way, right? And nobody likes to say I told you so. So
So we
that's
have
the anxious.
four frameworks for you on how you are able to navigate through the next couple months and probably the next couple years, because we expect to be in this market for at least another 18 months. If you write down nothing other than 4 words from everything that we've given you today and last month, I would say it is these 4 words, the 4 most powerful words in real estate. Here's what happens next. Paige, why is that so important?
Well, because you set expectations in the stage. Let me ask you guys, have any of you ever had a diagnosis at the doctor and they didn't say, here's what happens next? They just said, well, we're going to get back to you. How did that make you feel? Not very good. But if they had said, here's what happens next, my nurse is going to call you on Tuesday. We're going to set an appointment then. From there, we're going to review the charts. And in the charts, we're going to then decide what the treatment plan looks like. That would make you feel more comforted than we'll get back to you, right? So here's what happens next helps reduce the anxiety and gives that snuggie because you're laying out the expectations so they're not left wondering.
So again, if you take nothing else away, if you write nothing else down, if you do this on every call, every meeting, every client appointment, everything that you go on, you will be more successful because that is the best way for you to deliver comfort by providing clarity on the next step. This hospitality is a dialogue. And so I want you to envision that you're standing in an entryway of a home. You're there for a final walkthrough, and you've never met the wife before. She's never seen the house. She's coming in from out of town, and you're wondering will she like the house or will she come in and say, we're not closing next week. We're done. Wife enters the house. You have great fashion sense, so you notice she's wearing a dress that looks like it's from Goodwill. And behind her, you have their 16-year-old daughter who has a Prada bag. As you tour the house, again, trying to impress her, trying to see what she thinks about it, what she outlines is that the reason that she's moving from out of town is to be able to give her daughter a better life than what she had. You learn that she grew up poor And so poor in fact that she was never able to buy a lunchbox that all the other kids would have going to school. And she always had to have a bag, and that made her feel, again, that she didn't have everything that she wanted. And so she wanted to give that to her daughter. You listen a little bit further, you hear that she's a huge Harry Potter fan. So at that moment in time, as you go through, the question is right, what do you do? Do you just keep proceeding on the house tour? Do you do something different? What our agent Violet did in that, in order to be able to learn and deliver hospitality, is she took a couple steps back. She added a note about how this lady loved a lunchbox, how she was a big Harry Potter fan. And the next day she went to the store in the Galleria to buy a Harry Potter lunchbox.
Which means she took her life in her own hands to actually physically go to the Galleria.
Yeah, yeah, going to the Galleria these days. In that moment, right, with the ability to hear, the ability to listen first, ask questions, and then take action, Viola was able to show that she was there and she was able to deliver great hospitality. So when the closing came and she was able to give this gift, she created an incredible amount of goodwill and welcomed this lady to Houston.
Mhm. If you want to learn more about hospitality and why it matters and why it's so important, HAR is having their fall conference, HAR Engage. Um, I think it's October 30th. Don't quote me on that, but you can find information on HAR. The main speaker is talking about the value of hospitality in a real estate transaction. Please, please, please sign up because that is part of where you are allowed the space to give comfort.
Paige is also one of the speakers.
You don't need to come to that. Y'all get to see me every month, and that's more than enough that anybody should have to suffer through.
Paige, why is it important to make the charitable assumption now more than ever?
Because I know that when you say things to me, Bob, that you don't necessarily intend it to be unkind, and sometimes I take it that way. And so if I make the charitable assumption that you're not actually trying to insult me or tell me that my cooking was burnt and you're saying it in a nice way, that is not the intent of the other side. And in these environments, your clients will say things or do things that may make you feel a certain way. That is not their intent. They never thought about it that way. They're just trying to get it out and do something about it. But we have to decide internally and emotionally that when somebody responds to me a certain way, I need to make the charitable assumption that they didn't intend it angrily at me and they weren't trying to insult me. It's about them. And I need to get to the bottom of what that is, right? So I'm going to assume that their intention was well meaning and I'm not going to take it personally.
Now, Paige, the flip side of that, again, just like this, is it is easy to misconstrue words.
Absolutely.
Why do you recommend that agents pick up the phone and meet people in person versus sending text messages?
Have you ever reread your text message and said, oh gosh, if they read it that way, that's not what I intended to say? I was moving fast trying to get something out, and I didn't actually have a clear thought on that, or I could see where they would come back and not understand what I said, right? So you pick up the phone and say, hey, Bob, I just want to clarify this because I'm not sure I understood. I know you said blah. Does that mean this? Oh my God, no. What I meant to say was absolutely we want to move forward and blah 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 blah. We're so excited. I can't believe I did that. Pick up the phone.
And also, Paige, when you think about the world that we're in now, again, tied to here's what happens next, why is it so important to own the outcome and help the client get what they're looking for?
Um, it goes back to setting expectations, Bob, and if you'll run the next pieces of that is that if you set the process from the beginning, right? When I was in production, I would say things, and if I had a seller right now, I would acknowledge that they are working in the hardest market that they have ever had to sell in, most likely, except for the Great Recession. And then I would say something along the lines of, look, because you said it was important that we sold by Thanksgiving, because you really didn't want this financial stress of carrying two mortgages through the holidays. Is that still right? Right? I'm trying to understand what their real outcome is that they want. Great. Well, here's the thing. I can't tell you in this market exactly where your house is going to sell at exactly what price. But what I can do is tell you that we can control our response to the market. And when we see that we've had three open houses with this number of showings and this, and we outline what we deliver from a marketing perspective, and we don't have the outcome that you want, it tells us that we're not there on price. And at that point, we need to have a discussion if you still want to be done with this by Thanksgiving on where do we need to move with the price. And so I'm going to have those conversations with you along the way. And I want to set that up now. My hope is we get it right the first time. But because this market is the hardest and it's unpredictable, we're going to have to work in partnership along the way to see if we get it right.
One of the things that we are seeing on the data is that agents who are showing up for buyers and sellers with a more clear and specific plan are winning over agents that are setting unclear plans or non-specific plans.
Or letting the client drive the outcome, because remember, you guys are professionals and you do this all day, every day. This client does it once every 3 to 10 years.
The big thing also to use for that, if you're like, how do I customize my playbook for this client? ChatGPT is your friend and can help you do that in moments. It's a
We
great
now
way to
say at
do that.
our house, I talk to my friend Chat.
One of the things that we were asked for also, which I thought was brilliant, is they said, can you give me an example of what you would recommend we say to specific people? And
In
say,
terms
how
of
do I
like
use this data? And
but
how do I then ask them a question by text, by call, to get them to engage and or take the next step in the process?
yeah, but in terms of asking questions to help that client get clear on their goals.
So we had two different profiles for you here today. One is a first-time buyer couple in Cyprus, call it about the $350,000 budget. The data that's relevant is in Cyprus, North Cyprus. Prices are up about 2% over the year. Days on market are up by over a third. The number of sales are down year over year. Pendings are down year over year, but you're still in a seller's market, but it's softening a little bit. So with that data and with that area, here are three questions that you can ask that you might be able to get somebody in that situation to engage, right? Is a lower interest rate more helpful for you, or is it better for you to have a lower price, right? Interesting way to be able to talk about rate buy downs. Number two, would you be open to considering new construction options as they're offering more incentives? And three, have you strategized with a lender to identify the ideal deal structure for you? Again, knowing that things have changed in the mortgage market.
And by the way, if you don't have a mortgage partner that can have those strategic conversations with your clients, call us because we do. It's so important in this market that it's not a fly-by-night lender who just decided to get their mortgage license and doesn't know anything about anything. You need somebody to give them good financial advice.
For your Heights sellers, prices are down about 5% year over year. Inventory is up. Volume of sales up, again, mostly due to the derecho and the hurricane, and pendings are up. So big strategic questions are, what would happen if we're still on the market through the holidays? What, in your opinion, is causing your home not to sell?
That's going to unpack a lot.
And would you be open to hearing what last month's sellers did differently? Gives you an opportunity to bring in some of the new data on pending.
Mhm.
One other tip that we've seen a lot lately has been around awards on social media. Our agent Brad got named the #1 realtor in Fort Bend County. And AI, there is a new search on Google called AI search. What you'll see on AI search is those awards that you're posting on social media are getting picked up in your AI results. And when chat says, hey, what do you know about Brad Evans? It is now repeating back #1 realtor in Fort Bend County. That has been an incredibly effective strategy recently.
Well, Bob, and we're just at time. What it didn't say, and I know we've got to run, is that what chat should say is he has the best Christmas light display, and he probably is starting right now developing it.
We wanted to leave you with one question to ponder because I think that this will have a big impact if you give it a couple moments to discuss and think about for the month. What is one habit that if you mastered today would make your future life easier?
And you know what the answer is not? Eat more tacos. Sadly.
We look forward to seeing you on October 21st. Have a great day.
Bye, guys. Happy selling.